we've been talking about a lot of different stuff. I had a little summary. We've talked about that a healthy community, a healthy Christian community, we share our burdens. We've talked about the fact that there's some stuff we're supposed to carry our own burden, yet we're supposed to share each other's burdens, because there is a mission in life that God has given us, that's what I'm supposed to do. This is my job. This is my path that I must carry. But there's also community stuff that's just too big for any one of us that we're supposed to do, and that has to do with tasks, that has to do with carrying emotion, that has to do with dealing with life problems. And so there are times that we share pieces of that burden together as we go on the path that God has selected us to, and we want to be part of God's kingdom that way. We talked about a healthy Christian community encouraging each other. That the two sides to that is we want to encourage and push each other to follow God. That's great. Well, what if there was like a thing that's like, "Hi, Dave," behind that? That would be fantastic. Someone can get on that. But as we encourage each other, there's an element of exhorting, like calling people to live a certain way, to follow God, and there's also the encouragement. So there's a pulling and a pushing that goes in with that, where we want to say not only, "Hey, great job, keep going," but also, "Hey, here's what you should be doing." And we need to be willing to do that, and always doing that in gentleness and in kindness and in love. We talked about working together. Probably the best way to feel like we're a community is to do a project together, to serve together. And we work shoulder to shoulder to work on a project, and not necessarily just tasks, to be on the same mission together, knowing we're not alone. It's not up to us to carry it alone. And then we've talked about unbinding. There are issues, there are barriers, and there are a struggle that we as Christians face. And sometimes, just like Lazarus, where Jesus does the work to bring us from death to life, but then he says, "Okay, roll away that big rock keeping him in the tomb," and he's still got stinky grave clothes on him. And you need to help unbind Lazarus. And there's times that we need together to help each other as we grow in Christ, as we grow in love. But I want to wrap up with a theme that I talk about all the time. Here's the secret, if you're really paying attention. I really have about 3 sermons that I preach over and over. And this is one of them. So I probably shouldn't have said that. We'll edit that out. But this is a theme that has become more and more important, though. The further along in this, the less I'm worried about proving everything and focusing on what I think is what God has called us to do. And that is today, we're loving. That is the call of Christ. That is the Jesus creed, to love God and to love people. And there is an infinite ways of understanding that and doing that. So please keep coming back. We'll talk about those infinite ways. Right? But this is another one, that in community, one of the things that we're supposed to do is to love each other, to love God, and love people. I was reading this is just from a dictionary definition of community: having a shared purpose, interacting frequently, and members supporting each other. How do you define a community? And I thought, wow, that should be the way a church is, right? That should be the way a neighborhood is. That should be the way a family is. A community has a shared purpose. Maybe it's survival. Maybe it's sharing the gospel. Maybe it's keeping our HOA clean. Whatever it is, we have a shared purpose. And interacting frequently. You can't be a community if you never hang out, if you never see each other. Interacting frequently, and members supporting each other. I love that. So let me start by just saying this, that you belong here. This is your community. Whether you like it or not, sorry. This is it. This is what you got. And I don't know about you, but I love this community. I know sometimes I can be cynical and I can be sarcastic. But man, I'll tell you what, the thing that keeps me coming back is you. I love this group. And all the people who aren't here right now that are part of this group. And I think more people should be a part of this group. I think they should be part of this community because you're fantastic and they will enhance us and we can enhance them. And so we are better when we have frequent connection. And I think sometimes we fall in the trap of, man, I wish we had more or better. Man, I don't wish we had more or better. I just am so thankful for the community we have. And this is it. It is who you have. This is just about right. Right? I hope when you look around and you realize this community of Restore, this is just about right. The right people are together that God has brought together, and we would love to invite more people to be part of that. And I believe God is doing that in His timing. And the people that need to be here are here. I'm not going to embarrass people, but think in your mind folks who have come in the last few years. We have almost an entirely new congregation than when we were over at the showroom. I mean, a lot of you are still here, but we've had so many people come in. There are people who just needed to be here that God brought, and that's our community. And I think this is the reason it is. is because we really want to do these two things. One, we want to love Jesus. That's our first point today, love Jesus. And you know our theme verses, we're going to say them again. Twice a year I usually talk about this, so I'm going to slip it in here. It's Acts 2, verses 42 through 43, and then we'll also look at 46 through 47 in this one. Love Jesus. Pardon me. I suppose I could increase the font, but this is easy. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miracles and signs and wonders. And they worshiped together in the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. And then also Acts 5, the very next passage, very next chapter. Acts 5:38 through 42 says this: the apostles left the high council, and we'll go into this whole story, but the apostles left the high council rejoicing that God had counted them worthy to suffer disgrace for the name of Jesus. Woohoo! We get to suffer. And every day in the temple and from house to house, they continued to teach and preach this message: Jesus is the Messiah. When we talk about our common purpose, it's not necessarily what we're supposed to go out and do. Our common purpose is to love Jesus. What's the message? What is the thing that brought them together? What thing did they all understand? They understood that Jesus is Lord. The teaching that they devoted themselves, what the apostles were teaching, that they listened to, the teaching that they cared about, was the description and the explanation passed on of the life and teaching and example of Jesus. That's what they listened to. That's what they talked about. How is Jesus the Messiah, and how did he live, and how does that teach us to live? That's what the apostles were teaching. First-hand knowledge. And then it passed along. This is who Jesus is, and this is why we love him. It's why they loved Jesus, in that they knew he was the Christ. Those lessons, I imagine, and they're standing in the temple or they're gathering from house to house and devoting themselves to the teaching, seemed less like a doctrinal class or an inspirational TED Talk or a I talk and you listen authoritative, but more of a discourse and hearing someone talk about something they love so much they can't stop bringing it up. I was thinking of all the hobbies that we do that with. This morning I embarrassed the crew because I was talking about what's happening in my Lord of the Rings game that I play online. And how I was really excited last night because my high elf character finally got his legendary sword. And Chuck said, "Please stop." And realizing, oh, he'll never be able to respect me in the front. No, that's not true. But
I love you, Dave.
yes, things that we love. You know that, you ever talk to, and this happens growing up in Boise, Idaho. This happens with kind of old farmer guys. They say like 3 words an entire day. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Until you hit their thing. Until you touch on their topic. You mentioned small engine repair, you cannot shut that guy up for the next 45 minutes. And maybe there's some of you in here, and I'm not going to say who they are, Deb, but that's gardening. You mentioned gardening. How are the blueberries doing? And then settle in, man. Right? Maybe it's cooking. Maybe it's your dog or your cat or your grandchildren or whatever the thing is. That's what we're talking about. That's the mission. That's loving. We need to love Jesus so much that it just, the minute there's an opportunity, we can't not. We can't not talk about him. And not preaching and not confronting, but just because how much we love Jesus, because the more we know him, the more we love him. They loved Jesus because they saw what Jesus did to and through the apostles and in their own lives. They were in awe because of signs and wonders, mostly healing. The apostles were able to heal. I think sometimes, I will say this, I think healing still exists. You know, that's one of the tenets of the Christian and Missionary Alliance. I think sometimes it's not as dramatic these days because we have such great medicine that seems to replicate miracles. But I know for a fact I have observed actual healings. And yes, there's healings physically. There's healing spiritually. One of my favorite things of working with recovery, with those in addiction, is seeing somebody get healed, because there's just no way that happens without God, without some spiritual influence. Yes, I know people get clean without God. I get it. But there's to see a miraculous change when someone has tried over and over, to see them change. Or maybe it's not just chemicals, but it's anger or food or whatever. To see God perform miracles, we should be in awe. That makes us love him. What else? They prayed. I love that prayer was part of this. What better way to express love than to actually have conversation with somebody? It's hard to love somebody, to show that you love somebody without talking to them. Communicating to and listening to Jesus. What a better way. That is how you express love, and especially doing that together around each other. Talking to Jesus together. And worship. They worshiped. There was an experience. I don't know what a worship service looked like in the early church, whether they had a lute. I don't know what instrument they used. A lyre. Is that an instrument? Okay, thank you. But they worshiped together. They expressed their love and experienced the love of Jesus and expressed it together. We know there was some songs. They know they sang together. They worshiped, and they engaged their emotions and their minds in a way that expressed love. I love this. The reason I included this chapter 5, that before, this is where the apostles have been beaten and drugged before the council, and they had been. They said, "You can't teach anymore." And finally, one of the leaders says this right before the apostles were let loose. It's like, you know what, guys? Here's what we need to do. Let's leave them alone. We'll threaten them, sure. Give them a good beating this time. But you know what? If this is of God, there's nothing we can do against it. And if it's not, it's going to peter out. And it says, go on their way. And they left. And what did they go out doing? They didn't go out and talk about deep doctrinal expression. They went out and talked about how much they loved Jesus because they knew Jesus was the Messiah. And they were privileged to suffer for that. We say one of our tenets is, from this passage, is we want to be a church that grows, and we've talked often about that. Yeah, I would love to see a few more folks, people who God calls to this group, but also we want to grow spiritually. We want to grow, and I love that because of the way they loved God, and because of the way they loved each other, because of how they understood Jesus was, God added to their number. People came flocking to them because they were convinced of the theological rightness and the explanations about God and how to live by the rules of God. No, that's not why, right? That is not why they came flocking to the people. That's not why they had good reputation among the people. The reason they came flocking to the early church was because they saw that people's lives had changed, and they saw this miraculous spirit and this group of people who loved Jesus because they realized he was the Messiah. They weren't necessarily convinced, they experienced it. And they observed Christians experiencing it together, experiencing the love of Jesus together. Even when it was difficult, and even when they were persecuted by the religious people of the time. The people were in awe, and they were interested, and they joined in spite of threat. And so they joined. God put them in the favor of the people around them, and they joined in prayer and worship and learning, not out of compulsion, not out of trying harder to follow the rules, but because they knew to love Jesus. And I think especially the early church, because they had people right there who hung out with him. People who knew Jesus loved them and they loved Jesus. People who got to walk and talk and observe Jesus and pass that along. So our call today is to know Jesus and to love him. It's harder because he's not sitting here with us. We can't sit across from a table and have coffee. But we do know he's real, and we do know he indwells us, and we do know that we need to pray and listen and to worship. So I want us to do that together. When you have a moment where you experience Jesus and your love for him increases, share that with each other. Share it with each other. Let me know. I might make you tell us with a microphone. Or over coffee. Or send an email. Let's share. Let's grow together. Let's gain courage because we know to love Jesus. Because he loves us. And our second point is we're to love like Jesus. Again, the theme that I think should run through Restore and be in our DNA, and the thing that I know actually to this day people kind of know about us and I love, that they know they can come in here and be loved regardless of where they're at, regardless of what they believe, where they're struggling, or even if they believe slightly differently, that this group will embrace them and love them. People who are in trouble, people who have had trauma, people who are in pain can come to this group and be loved because we understand this second part. We're supposed to love Jesus, and because we love Jesus with all of our heart and soul and mind, we are able to love like Jesus, which means we love everybody. I saw this in a quote in a TV show recently, and I loved it, that a priest was saying, I believe we're put here to love people. I believe I'm here to love people. And I gotta admit, that touched me. I don't have a lot of skills, and I am not fantastic at everything. But I do believe I am put on the earth to love people. I believe I'm your pastor because I love you. And I am so privileged to do that. And I hope you love each other that way. This is a lovable group. We're put here to love each other. Acts 2:44 and 45, right in the middle of that passage. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. We've talked about that often here. What does that mean? I grew up hearing that and being confused by it, and I loved the way my dad explained it to me. My dad, the preacher, was like, no, they actually did that. That was good. They gave up what they needed, what they had, so that everyone could have something, which ran counter to what we kind of have in our society. No explanation of why it wasn't really that. The older I got, in some different places where I've listened to other preachers at times, there's a lot of working around to somehow say that's not what that really means. That you don't really have to go sell all your stuff, right? But the reality is that there was a way that they said, if I have a resource and there's someone in our family who has a need, we're going to take care of them. And this group does that. You are a generous group. Not just generous in the offering, but generous to other people, the people around each other. I hear about it all the time. We're providing for each other, and I love that. What a great example. Because we love Jesus, we love each other. Loving Jesus and being loved by him will result in us loving others. And in a way that they know they're being loved. That's why the sharing part is so important. If we have to explain how we're loving you, that if they take our love as hate, we're doing it wrong. Right? We need to love people in a way that they know they're being loved. We're going to talk later. I have this big section here, but I don't want us to, well, I don't want to get too hot. It's almost 78 degrees. Yeah. We're going to talk about how do we love people we disagree with. But let me put it this way. I'll sum up probably 10 minutes of discussion here. And we'll talk about it another time. But here's how we do it. We love them. We can disagree with somebody and still love them. The example here is this passage we have here in John 13. Says, and this is Jesus saying, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you're my disciples. We have lost that. We spend so much time, if you're ever listening to conferences or the Christian radio or go online, heaven forbid, and look at Christian Twitter, it is all about why everyone else is wrong except us and how we need to separate. We have so many denominations and we have so many splits and there's so much talk about why the other guy is wrong. It's disgusting. And the world, why are they not flocking to us? They don't see the love of Jesus. They see the hate of Christians. The example is right before this. You know what happens right before this where Jesus says, go love each other? He washed Judas's feet. To the Last Supper. He had just said, hey, Judas, you got stuff to do, go do it. Jesus knew what Judas was doing. Do you think he disagreed with Judas? He washed his feet. And he let him have the Last Supper with him. And I believe Jesus loved Judas. If Jesus can wash Judas's feet and invite him to dinner, we can love people who disagree with us about how to live the Christian life. Doesn't mean we have to change our view. Doesn't mean we're weak. Doesn't mean we're flip-floppy. But it means we need to love each other. We need to love people and we need to show them by sharing what we have, not just our stuff and not just our money, but our time and our care and our resources and our love. Without strings attached. That you got to be sorry enough, or you got to come to my church, or you got to start believing like me. we need to love them as Christ loved us, right? My favorite verse in the Bible. Romans 5:8. God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. God did not send Jesus when we fixed ourselves up and finally agreed to go along with his plan. When we were at our most rebellious, at our most sinful, he loved us enough to die. How do we love each other like Christ loved us? We love each other when we're at each other's worst. And we share and we care. Not just because Jesus told us to, but because we know that's right. And we exemplify the love of Christ. So we share, we are in community, we're in koinonia, the Greek for fellowship, where we have affection for each other, but we also live our life together. We are in community. And we do that by loving each other. We love Jesus, and then we emulate his teachings and his example by loving those around us. So let's focus on the one thing that should unify us as Christians. Jesus is Christ. And growing to love him and experience him and his way more and more every single day. So I'll leave us with this verse, and then we'll be done. 1 John 4:19. We love each other because he first loved us. May we be people who live in real community because we love Jesus more each day as we spend time with him in prayer and learning and fellowship, and we share our lives with the people of God the people that God has placed in our lives. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to see you next week as we're starting a new series. So we'll see you next week at this time. Thank you. Have a good day.